I returned from New York City after 2 weeks at my mother's bedside. When I got home, I heard desperate banging from the basement. I broke the padlock and found my wife, filthy, dehydrated, and confused. She had been locked down there for 14 days. When I asked who did this, she whispered, "Lily, our daughter." The banging started 3 seconds after I walked through my front door. Desperate, like someone hammering against wood with weakening strength. I froze in my entryway, suitcase still in hand, my exhausted brain trying to process what I was hearing. 2 weeks in Chicago watching my mother recover from a stroke. 2 weeks of hospital chairs and bad coffee and fluorescent lights. And I'd come home to this, to banging, coming from below. From my basement. "Helen?" I called out, my voice sharp with sudden panic. The banging intensified, accompanied now by a sound that might have been a voice, might have been crying. I dropped my suitcase and ran. Before we continue, make sure to like and subscribe to this channel. Have you ever experienced a betrayal so deep from a family member that it completely shook your world? And how did you respond? Let me know in the comments below. The basement door stopped me cold. A padlock, heavy-duty industrial grade, looped through the handle and door frame like this was a storage unit and not part of my home. We'd never locked this door. Never. My hands were already shaking as I grabbed the lock and pulled, but it held firm. The banging from below grew more frantic. "Helen!" I shouted, pressing my ear against the wood. "Helen, I'm here, hold on." Her voice came through muffled and broken. "Jack? Jack, please." She said you left me." The words didn't make sense. Nothing made sense. Where was Lily? Where was my daughter who'd promised to take care of her mother while I was gone? I didn't waste time on questions. I turned and ran for the garage, tearing through my toolbox until I found the bolt cutters. The padlock gave way with a crack that echoed through the house. I yanked the door open and the smell hit me like a wall. Unwashed human waste, something rotten and wrong. I took the stairs 3 at a time, my phone's flashlight cutting through the darkness, and there she was, Helen. My wife of 37 years, crumpled on the concrete floor in her nightgown, surrounded by empty water bottles and filth. Her hair was matted to her skull. Her skin was gray. Her eyes were hollow and sunken, and when they found mine, they filled with tears that carved tracks through the dirt on her face. "You came back," she whispered, her voice a rasp. "She said you weren't coming back." I was already on my knees beside her, already pulling off my jacket to cover her skeletal frame, already calling 911 with shaking hands. "Who did this?" I asked, though some part of me already knew. Already understood why Lily's car wasn't in the driveway, why the house had been empty and dark. "Who locked you down here, Helen?" She looked at me with eyes that held both confusion and clarity. "Lily," she whispered, her cracked lips barely forming the word. "Our daughter. She said she needed the money. She said you left me because I was too much trouble," she said. Her voice broke. She said I wouldn't remember anyway. The words landed like physical blows, each one reconfiguring my understanding of the daughter I thought I knew. Lily had done this, had locked her own mother in a basement for 2 weeks, had told her I'd abandoned her, had left her to die. The EMTs arrived 12 minutes later. I'd carried Helen upstairs by then, wrapped in blankets, her body so light it terrified me. "Severe dehydration," one paramedic said, his voice professionally calm but his eyes horrified. "Malnutrition, bed sores." How long was she down there? 14 days, I told him. The number hung in the air like an accusation. 14 days while I'd been 1,000 miles away, trusting my daughter to care for my wife. 14 days of Helen calling for help that never came, of believing I'd abandoned her, of suffering alone in the dark. The paramedic's expression hardened. "Sir, we're required to report this. Police will need to speak with you." I nodded, numb. "Report it." "Yes, because this wasn't an accident or neglect. This was calculated. This was attempted murder." Helen whispered my name as they loaded her into the ambulance. I climbed in beside her, holding her cold hand, and made her a promise. "I'm going to make this right," I told her. "Lily is going to answer for what she did. She's going to get exactly what she deserves." Helen's eyes were already closing, exhaustion and dehydration pulling her under. But I saw her lips move one more time, forming words I could barely hear. She said I was too expensive, that I wouldn't remember. The machines beeped around us as the ambulance pulled away from the house. My phone was lighting up with missed calls, 47 of them, all from Lily, all coming in after my plane had landed. She knew I was home. She was panicking. And somewhere out there, my daughter was running. But she couldn't run far enough. Not from this. Not from what she'd done. As the ambulance raced through the dark streets toward the hospital, I held Helen's hand and made a silent vow. Justice wasn't going to be quick or easy, but it was going to be absolute. Lily had locked her mother in a basement and left her to die. Now I was going to make sure she spent the rest of her life understanding exactly what that cost. Some betrayals can't be forgiven. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. And the door to my daughter's future had just slammed shut with the same finality as that padlock clicking into place. She wanted what she deserved. I was going to make certain she got it. 2 weeks earlier, I'd stood in this same kitchen watching Lily pour her mother a cup of chamomile tea, and I'd felt nothing but gratitude. My own mother had just had a massive stroke in Chicago, and the doctors were saying hours mattered, maybe days. I needed to be on a plane immediately. Helen couldn't travel, not with her condition deteriorating the way it had been. She got confused in new places, agitated, sometimes violent when she didn't recognize her surroundings. Lily had driven in from Toronto the moment I called, had walked through the door with her overnight bag and that calm, capable expression she'd inherited from her mother. "Dad, you need to go be with Grandma," she'd said, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "Mom will be fine with me, I've got this." She'd smiled then, that same smile I'd seen 1,000 times growing up when she'd promised to clean her room or finish her homework. The smile of my responsible daughter, my trustworthy daughter. I'd watched her guide Helen to her favorite chair, speaking in that soft, patient voice you use with frightened children. "Come on, Mom, let's get you settled. Dad has to take a trip, but I'm going to stay with you. We'll have a girls' week, okay?" Helen had looked at me with those confused eyes and asked, "Where's Jack going?" even though I was standing right there. Lily had squeezed her hand gently and said, "He'll be back soon, I promise." I'd hugged them both, grabbed my hastily packed suitcase, and left believing my wife was in loving hands. The memory of that moment played on loop in my head now as I sat in the emergency room at 3 a.m., Helen's cold hand in mine while doctors swarmed around us with 4 bags and monitors and voices that were trying very hard to stay professional. "Severe dehydration," the attending physician was saying, his words coming from somewhere far away even though he was standing right beside Helen's gurney. "We're running fluids now, but her electrolytes are critically imbalanced. She's also significantly malnourished. When did she last eat a proper meal?" I opened my mouth but nothing came out. I didn't know. I'd been gone 14 days. Lily was supposed to be feeding her. "And these," the doctor continued, gently lifting Helen's nightgown to reveal her hip, and I had to look away from the angry red sores blooming across her skin like wounds. Stage 2 pressure ulcers. These develop from prolonged immobility, lying in one position for extended periods without movement or repositioning. Days, minimum. His eyes met mine and I saw the question forming there, the one he was too professional to ask outright. How does someone let this happen? A nurse was cutting away Helen's nightgown, the fabric so soiled it went straight into a biohazard bag. Another was cleaning her skin with warm cloths, documenting every injury, every sign of neglect with the methodical detachment of someone who'd seen this before. I watched them work on my wife's body and felt nothing. Numbness had settled over me like a blanket, the kind of numbness that protects you when feeling everything would tear you apart. "We're admitting her," the doctor said. "We need to get her stabilized, run a full workup, make sure there's no organ damage from the dehydration. And Mr. Reynolds, I'm legally required to report this. A social worker will be speaking with you shortly, and likely the police." Detective Morrison arrived an hour later while I was sitting in the hallway outside Helen's room, my head in my hands, trying to understand how the world had tilted so far off its axis in the span of a single night. He was younger than I expected, maybe mid-40s, with tired eyes that had seen too many bad things. "Mr. Reynolds, I'm Detective Morrison, Elder Abuse Unit. I need to ask you some questions about your wife's condition." He sat down beside me without waiting for an invitation, pulled out a notebook that had seen better days. "Walk me through the last 2 weeks. Where were you? Who was caring for your wife? When did you last speak to your daughter?" I told him everything. About my mother's stroke, about Lily volunteering to stay with Helen, about how I'd trusted her completely because she was my daughter, because family takes care of family. "There must be an explanation," I heard myself saying, the words sounding desperate even to my own ears. "Lily wouldn't hurt her mother. She loves her. Maybe she got overwhelmed. Maybe she couldn't handle Helen's episodes and panicked. Maybe—" Morrison's face stopped me mid-sentence. It was the expression of a man who'd heard every justification and excuse 1,000 times before, and who knew exactly where the story was going even if I didn't want to see it yet. Mr. Reynolds, when did you last speak to your daughter? Phone call, text message, anything? I pulled out my phone, now charged from the hospital wall outlet. The screen lit up and my stomach dropped. 47 missed calls, all from Lily, all time-stamped after my plane had landed at LaGuardia 6 hours ago. I scrolled through them with shaking hands. The first came in at 6:15 p.m., right when my flight touched down. Then another at 6:22. 3 more by 6:30. The calls became more frequent as the night went on, clustering together in desperate bursts. 11 calls between 9 p.m. and 10 p.m. The last one at 11:39 p.m., 8 minutes before I'd walked through my front door. Not one call in the 14 days before that. Not one text asking how my mother was doing or updating me on Helen's condition. Just silence for 2 weeks, then 47 calls in 6 hours. She knew, I whispered, staring at the call log. She knew I was coming home. She was trying to, what, warn me? Stop me? Morrison took the phone from my hands gently, scrolled through the missed calls himself. Mr. Reynolds, did your daughter have a key to your house? I nodded. Of course she did. She'd had a key since she was 16. And was she staying at your residence for the full 2 weeks you were gone? I started to say yes, then stopped. I didn't actually know. I'd assumed she was. She'd brought an overnight bag. She'd promised to stay. But I'd been 1,000 miles away dealing with my own family crisis. I'd taken her at her word. Morrison's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then stood up with the careful movements of someone delivering news they knew would detonate. Mr. Reynolds, we pulled security footage from your neighbor's doorbell cameras, the ones that face your driveway. He pulled up something on his phone, turned the screen toward me. This is from the day after you left for Chicago. I watched grainy footage of my driveway, timestamp in the corner reading 2:34 p.m. Lily's car pulling in. Lily getting out, walking to the front door, letting herself in. 14 minutes later, she emerged carrying 2 bags, locked the door behind her, got in her car, and drove away. Morrison swiped to another video. This is from 3 days later. Same scene. Lily arriving, going inside, emerging 9 minutes later. And this, another swipe, is from day 7. He kept swiping. Day 9, day 12. Each video the same. Lily arriving, staying less than 15 minutes, leaving. The final video was from yesterday morning. 11 minutes inside the house. Morrison looked at me with something that might have been pity. Your daughter visited your home once in 14 days, Mr. Reynolds. For 11 minutes. According to the footage, that's the only time anyone entered or exited your property until you arrived tonight. The words hung in the air between us, reshaping everything I thought I knew. Lily hadn't been overwhelmed by caretaking. She hadn't been staying at the house watching over her mother. She'd locked Helen in the basement on day 1 and abandoned her there. And the 47 missed calls weren't concern. They were panic. The panic of someone who'd just realized their crime was about to be discovered. The bank manager's office smelled like artificial lemon and bad news. I'd been sitting across from Patricia Wu for 20 minutes while she pulled up account statements on her computer, her expression growing more concerned with each click of her mouse. I'd come here straight from the hospital after Detective Morrison suggested I check our finances, his voice carrying that particular weight that told me he already knew what I'd find. Helen was stable, sedated, sleeping under clean sheets with an 4 in her arm. I should have been relieved. Instead, I was watching 40 years of careful saving evaporate on a computer screen. Mr. Reynolds, Patricia said carefully, turning the monitor toward me, your joint savings account currently has a balance of $3,247. Your money market account shows $891. The retirement fund you've been contributing to since 1985 was liquidated entirely on October 23rd. The numbers didn't make sense. They couldn't make sense. 6 weeks ago, we'd had just over $300,000 across those accounts. $300,000 I'd earned through 4 decades of civil engineering work, through 60-hour weeks, and missed family dinners and projects that had taken me from my wife's side more times than I could count. Money we'd saved for Helen's care when the Alzheimer's got worse, for the memory facility that cost $8,000 a month, for the in-home nursing we'd eventually need. There must be a mistake, I heard myself saying, even though I already knew there wasn't. Patricia's finger traced down the screen, highlighting transaction after transaction. October 15th, wire transfer of $15,000 to an account at Chase. October 18th, $15,000 to an external account I don't have details on. October 20th, another $15,000. It continues like this every 2 to 3 days through November 8th. I stared at the dates. October 15th was 2 days after I'd left for Chicago. 2 days after I'd hugged Lily goodbye and trusted her with everything. I didn't authorize any of these transfers, I said, my voice sounding hollow. I was in Chicago. I didn't even have my banking password with me. Patricia nodded slowly, and I realized she'd already suspected as much. Mr. Reynolds, these transfers were all authorized using power of attorney documents filed with us on October 12th. According to our records, your wife Helen Reynolds granted full financial power of attorney to your daughter Lily Reynolds. She pulled up a scanned document, and there it was. Helen's signature at the bottom, witnessed and notarized. Except Helen couldn't have signed that document on October 12th because by October 12th, Helen could barely remember to sign her own name on birthday cards. I leaned closer to the screen, studying the signature. The loops were too perfect, too controlled. Helen's handwriting had been deteriorating for 2 years, becoming shakier and less consistent as the disease progressed. This signature was steady, deliberate, practiced. "Can I get a copy of this?" I asked. Patricia printed it without question, and the moment the paper came out of the printer, I saw it clearly. The H in Helen was identical to the H in the witness signature below it. Same slant, same pressure, same little flourish at the top. Lily had signed her mother's name and then signed as witness to her own forgery. I flipped the page over. The notary stamp belonged to someone named Robert Chen, Notary Public, commission number listed. "That's Adam's friend," I said aloud, realization crystallizing into rage. Adam's college roommate became a notary last year. He posted about it on Facebook. Morrison had warned me this was bigger than neglect. He'd used words like financial exploitation and elder abuse and conspiracy, but hearing words was different from seeing the evidence laid out in black and white. Lily hadn't just locked her mother in a basement. She'd systematically drained our life savings while Helen was too sick to understand what was happening, and I was too far away to stop it. "There's more," Patricia said quietly, pulling up another screen. "A home equity line of credit was opened on your property on October 25th. $75,000 borrowed against the house. That was processed using the same power of attorney documents." I felt something crack inside my chest. Our house. The home Helen and I had bought in 1993, where we'd raised Lily, where every room held memories of birthday parties and Christmas mornings and quiet Sunday afternoons. Lily had put a lien on her childhood home to steal more money from her parents. My phone buzzed. "Morrison," I answered on the second ring. "Jack, I need you to come down to the precinct. We've got something." 20 minutes later, I was sitting in an interrogation room that looked nothing like the ones on television. Just a plain office with a table and uncomfortable chairs and fluorescent lights that made everything look sick and yellow. Morrison laid a folder on the table between us. "We executed a search warrant on your daughter's apartment in Toronto this morning. Found these." He opened the folder. "Printouts of flight confirmations. 2 one-way tickets to Lisbon, Portugal, departing November 12th. Tomorrow, the day after my originally scheduled return flight from Chicago. They were running," Morrison said. "They planned to be out of the country before you came home and found your wife." I stared at the tickets. Lily Reynolds and Adam Reynolds, departing from Toronto Pearson International, arriving in Lisbon where they'd booked an Airbnb for 3 months using, I saw the payment confirmation, my stolen money. They'd planned this, every detail. Lock Helen in the basement where she'd be out of sight, forge the documents, drain the accounts, disappear to a country with complicated extradition laws before I returned. If my mother's condition hadn't improved sooner than expected, if I'd stayed in Chicago the full 3 weeks like I'd originally planned, Helen would have been in that basement for 21 days. She wouldn't have survived. And Lily would have been sipping wine in a Lisbon cafe, spending my money, while her mother's body grew cold on a concrete floor. "There's something else," Morrison said, his voice dropping. He pulled out another document, this one with Helen's neurologist's letterhead at the top. Medical records. Helen's prescription history. I scanned the list. Donepezil for cognitive function, memantine for moderate Alzheimer's, lorazepam for agitation. The dates jumped out at me. Last filled, August 3rd. 90-day supply. Refill requested never. Your daughter stopped filling her mother's medications 3 months ago, Morrison said. Helen's neurologist has been trying to reach you. Multiple calls, 3 letters sent to your address. Did you receive any of them? I shook my head numbly. Lily must have intercepted them, Morrison continued. Helen's doctor says those medications don't cure Alzheimer's, but they slow the progression. Without them, patients decline faster, become more confused, more vulnerable. Lily had been accelerating her mother's decline, making Helen more pliable, more unable to resist, more likely to die if left alone in a basement for 2 weeks. This wasn't just theft and neglect. This was calculated, methodical destruction of the woman who'd given birth to her. Helen was awake when I returned to her hospital room. Though awake didn't mean present. She stared at the 4 in her arm like it was a fascinating puzzle she couldn't quite solve, her fingers plucking weakly at the tape holding it in place. "Don't touch that, sweetheart," I said softly, gently moving her hand away. She looked at me with eyes that held no recognition, no fear this time, just empty confusion. The social worker had warned me that Helen might never fully process what happened to her, that trauma mixed with advanced Alzheimer's created a kind of merciful amnesia. But over the next hour, sitting beside her bed while machines beeped and nurses came and went, fragments emerged. Broken pieces of memory that Helen spoke in a child's uncertain voice, as if she wasn't sure whether she was remembering or dreaming. "The girl with the dark hair," Helen whispered, her gaze fixed on the ceiling. "She kept saying I was too much trouble, too expensive, that I wouldn't remember anyway, so what did it matter?" Her hand found mine, gripped it with surprising strength. "She said you'd left me because I was broken, that nobody wants broken things." Each word landed like a physical blow. I squeezed her hand back, my throat too tight to speak. "She locked the door," Helen continued, her voice drifting in and out like a radio losing signal. "I called for her. I called and called. But she didn't come back. Did I do something bad? Is that why she locked me down there?" The tears came then, sliding silently down her hollow cheeks, and I realized Helen thought she'd been punished, that she deserved what happened to her. "No," I managed, my voice breaking. "You didn't do anything wrong. Nothing. You hear me, Helen? This wasn't your fault." But she'd already drifted again, her attention caught by a bird outside the window, the moment lost to the disease that had stolen so much already and would eventually steal everything. I sat there holding her hand and hated my daughter with an intensity that scared me. Hated her for what she'd done, yes, but more for what she'd made Helen believe. That she was worthless, disposable, too broken to deserve basic human dignity. Morrison called while I was still sitting there. "We got them. Pearson Airport trying to board their flight to Lisbon. Canadian authorities have them in custody. Thought you might want to see this." He sent a video file. I waited until Helen fell asleep before I watched it, stepping into the hallway where the fluorescent lights hummed overhead and turned everyone's skin the color of old paper. The bodycam footage showed Toronto Pearson's International Terminal, timestamp reading 7:43 a.m. The camera followed 2 uniformed officers through the crowd toward gate E67. Lily and Adam sat in the boarding area, surrounded by luggage, scrolling through their phones while passengers lined up to board. Lily wore a sundress I'd never seen before, something expensive-looking with a designer bag at her feet. She was laughing at something on Adam's screen when the officers approached. I watched her look up, saw confusion cross her face, then recognition, then calculation. She knew immediately why they were there. "Lily Reynolds? Adam Reynolds?" The officer's voice came through clear on the bodycam. "We need you to come with us." Adam stood up slowly, his face draining of color. "But Lily..." Lily smiled, actually smiled. "There must be some mistake," she said smoothly, that same reasonable tone she'd used her whole life when talking her way out of trouble. "We're about to board a flight." The smile vanished when the handcuffs came out. I watched my daughter's face transform from confident to panic to enraged in the span of seconds. "You can't do this," she shouted as the officer secured her wrists behind her back. "My father is having a breakdown. Whatever he told you is lies. My mother is sick. She needs expensive care. We were trying to help." The lies came so easily, so naturally, like she'd rehearsed them. Other passengers were filming now, phones out, capturing Lily's arrest for social media. She noticed the cameras and her expression shifted again, trying for sympathy, tears forming in her eyes. "Please," she said to the officer, her voice breaking on cue. "My mom has Alzheimer's. We were just trying to help. This is all a misunderstanding." I stopped the video, Couldn't watch anymore. That wasn't the daughter I'd raised. Or maybe it was, and I just never wanted to see it. The cryptocurrency revelation came from financial forensics. Adam's supposed business that Lily had mentioned to me months ago, the reason they needed temporary help, the investment opportunity that would set them up for life, all of it fiction. Detective Morrison walked me through it in the precinct conference room, laying out bank statements and transaction records like evidence at a crime scene. Adam has a gambling problem, Morrison explained. Online crypto trading platforms. He'd been hiding it from your daughter for years, racking up debt. When she forged the power of attorney, she thought the money was going into legitimate investments. Instead, Adam lost $180,000 in high-risk trades in the first week. Another $80,000 to what appears to be a crypto scam, one of those double-your-Bitcoin schemes. The rest went to paying off his existing debts. So Lily had destroyed her mother for nothing. The money was gone, burned through Adam's addiction and stupidity, irretrievable. She'd locked Helen in a basement, stolen our life savings, abandoned her own mother to die alone in the dark, and all of it for money that no longer existed. Does Lily know? I asked. Morrison nodded. She found out yesterday. That's when the relationship started fracturing. Our investigators say they were fighting at their apartment when we arrived with the search warrant. She was screaming at him about the money, threatening to leave him. They'd destroyed each other, along with everything else. Good. I didn't want to see her. Didn't want to breathe the same air. But Morrison said it might help the case if I spoke with her, and part of me needed to look my daughter in the eye and understand how this had happened. How the little girl who'd cried when she accidentally stepped on an ant had become someone capable of such calculated cruelty. The Toronto detention center was exactly as bleak as expected. Gray walls, harsh lighting, the smell of industrial cleaner failing to mask something worse underneath. They brought Lily into a small room with a table bolted to the floor and cameras in every corner. She looked smaller in the orange jumpsuit, her hair pulled back without makeup, dark circles under her eyes. She looked young, vulnerable, and when she saw me she started crying. "Daddy," she said, the word she hadn't used since she was 12. "Daddy, I'm so sorry. I messed up. I messed up so badly." The tears were real, streaming down her face, her whole body shaking. I sat down across from her and said nothing. "You don't understand the pressure we were under," she continued, words tumbling out desperately. "Adam's business was failing. We had so much debt, I couldn't think straight. I just needed time to figure things out. I was going to pay everything back, I swear. I was going to bring Mom to Portugal with us once we got settled. The lies kept coming, each one more absurd than the last. You locked your mother in a basement," I said quietly. "You stopped her medications. You told her I wasn't coming back. You left her to die." "She wouldn't have remembered," Lily shouted, slamming her hands on the table. "Don't you get it? The Alzheimer's, Dad. She doesn't remember yesterday, she won't remember next week. Why are you destroying my life over something she won't even remember happened?" The silence that followed was absolute. I stared at my daughter and saw a stranger wearing her face. "Is that what you told yourself?" I asked. "That it didn't matter because she wouldn't remember? That her life meant less because her mind was failing?" I stood up slowly. "You're right about one thing. Helen won't remember what you did to her. But I will. Every single day for the rest of my life, I will remember that my daughter tried to murder her mother for money that doesn't even exist anymore." I turned to leave. "Dad, wait." Lily's voice cracked. "Please, I'm your daughter. Doesn't that mean anything?" I stopped at the door, looked back at her one last time. "You stopped being my daughter the moment you locked that door," I said. "You're just someone I used to know who shares my DNA." Her scream followed me down the hallway. "I'm still your daughter. You can't just throw me away. Dad. Daddy, please." But I kept walking, and the sound of her voice faded behind me like smoke. Christopher Walsh's office overlooked Lake Ontario from the 23rd floor, all glass and steel and the kind of quiet confidence that came with 30 years of winning cases most lawyers wouldn't touch. He'd come recommended by Detective Morrison, who'd said simply, "If you want justice and you want them to hurt for it, Walsh is your man." I sat across from him 3 days after Lily's arrest, Helen's medical bills already piling up on my kitchen counter, and told him exactly what I wanted. "Criminal charges aren't enough," I said. "The Crown is prosecuting them, yes, but I want more. I want a civil lawsuit, I want them to understand that what they did has consequences that will follow them for the rest of their lives. I want them to feel every single one." Walsh leaned back in his leather chair, fingers steepled, studying me with the kind of assessment lawyers do when they're deciding if a client has the stamina for a long fight. "Civil suits take time," he said carefully. "Years, potentially. They're expensive. And even if we win, which we will, there's no guarantee you'll see financial recovery. They've already burned through most of your money." I met his gaze without flinching. "I don't care about the money anymore. I care about accountability. I want a judgment against them that survives their prison sentences. I want it on record, permanently, what they did. I want anyone who ever Googles their names to find it." Walsh smiled then, thin and sharp. "Then let's make them infamous," he said, and pulled out a legal pad to begin building the case. The next day, I met Crown Attorney Patricia Chen in her office at the courthouse, a cluttered space that smelled like coffee and legal briefs. She was younger than Walsh, maybe early 40s, with an intensity that radiated from her like heat. "Mr. Reynolds," she said, shaking my hand with a grip that meant business, "I've been reviewing your daughter's case. It's one of the most calculated elder abuse cases I've seen in 15 years of prosecution." She spread files across her desk, color-coded tabs marking different sections. "Let me walk you through what we're charging them with." Her finger traced down a list that seemed to go on forever. Elder abuse causing bodily harm, financial exploitation of a vulnerable person, fraud over $5,000, forgery, uttering forged documents, criminal negligence causing bodily harm, and we're considering additional charges related to the medication withholding. Each charge carried years. Patricia broke them down with the precision of a surgeon. Elder abuse alone is up to 10 years. The financial exploitation, given the amount involved and the victim's vulnerability, could add another 14. Fraud of this magnitude, another 14. We're looking at potential consecutive sentences if the judge decides these crimes are distinct enough. She looked up from her papers. "Mr. Reynolds, I'm going to push for the maximum on everything. What your daughter did wasn't a moment of weakness or desperation. It was systematic, premeditated, and cruel. I want the court to understand that." The steel in her voice matched the steel in my spine. "How long?" I asked. "If you get everything you're asking for?" Patricia's smile was grim. 20 years, maybe more. She'd be in her 50s when she got out. The evidence review sessions happened in a windowless conference room that became my second home over the following weeks. Walsh, Patricia, Detective Morrison, financial forensics experts, and me, surrounded by boxes of documents and laptops playing audio recordings that made my stomach turn. "This is from Adam's phone," Morrison said, pressing play on a file dated October 14th. Lily's voice filled the room, tinny through the laptop speakers but unmistakably hers. "No, you have to make the H rounder. Helen always loops her H's. Look at this birthday card from last year, see? Like that. And for God's sake, don't press so hard. Her hands shake now, the signature should look shakier." Adam's nervous laugh. "I don't know if I can do this, Lil. Then I'll do it myself. Just get your friend to notarize it without asking questions." Morrison skipped ahead to another file. Text messages this time, displayed on the screen. "November 3rd, Lily to Adam, another 15K transferred. We're at 220K total. Portugal is looking better every day," Adam's response. "Getting the inheritance a little early, LOL. Think your dad will notice?" "Lily, by the time he figures it out, we'll be drinking wine in Lisbon. He can't touch us there." The laughing emoji at the end of her message made me close my eyes. They joked about it. Turned the destruction of their family into casual banter punctuated with emojis. Walsh made notes on his legal pad. "Jury's going to love these texts," he said without humor. "Shows clear intent, premeditation, and complete lack of remorse." The turning point came 2 weeks into evidence review. Adam's lawyer reached out to Patricia with an offer. "He wants to plead guilty," she told me over the phone. "In exchange for a reduced sentence, he's willing to testify against Lily. Give us everything. Who planned what, whose idea the basement was, all of it." I should have felt something. Relief, maybe, that the case would be easier to prosecute. Instead, I just felt tired. "What's he saying?" I asked. Patricia's pause told me I wasn't going to like it. "He's saying Lily was the mastermind, that locking Helen in the basement was entirely her idea, that he wanted to hire a nurse, but Lily said it was too expensive and too risky, that she's the one who stopped Helen's medications, that when he expressed concerns, She told him her mother wouldn't survive the Alzheimer's much longer anyway. So what difference did it make? Adam was saving himself by throwing Lily to the wolves. Part of me hated him for the betrayal, even though Lily deserved it. They'd destroyed each other completely, exactly as they'd destroyed everything else they touched. "There's more," Patricia said, and I heard papers rustling. "We found Lily's diary in her apartment during the search. She'd been documenting everything. Hold on, I'm going to read you an entry." The pause stretched out. When Patricia's voice came back, it was carefully controlled. "This is dated October 16th, 3 days after you left for Chicago. Quote, Day 3 with Mom. She's harder to manage than I thought. Keeps asking for Dad, getting agitated when I can't give her the answers she wants. The medications make her more alert, which is actually counterproductive for what we need. The basement is the only solution. Put her down there this morning with water and some food." She screamed for an hour, then went quiet. Problem solved. Adam's nervous, but I reminded him this is temporary. Once we're in Portugal, none of this will matter. Mom won't remember and Dad will be too busy dealing with the fallout to follow us. Everything's working according to plan. The silence on the phone was absolute. "Mr. Reynolds?" Patricia said finally. "You still there?" I was gripping the phone so hard my knuckles had gone white. She wrote it down, I managed. She documented her own crime. "Yes," Patricia said. "And it's dated before you came home, which proves premeditation beyond any doubt. Jack, this diary is going to destroy her defense. There's no way to argue this was panic or desperation, when she's literally describing it as a plan that's working. I thought about that little girl who used to write in journals with unicorn covers who'd come to me at age 12, asking how to spell complicated words for her diary entries. I'd encouraged her to keep writing, told her journals were important, that documenting your life gave you perspective. I'd never imagined she'd use that skill to document matricide. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined, wood-paneled and sterile, with fluorescent lights that bleached the color from everyone's skin. Helen sat beside me in a wheelchair even though she could walk short distances, but Patricia Chen had insisted on the wheelchair for the preliminary hearing. "The jury needs to see what was done to her," she'd said, and I'd hated the calculation in it even as I understood the necessity. Helen wore a soft blue cardigan I'd bought her the week before, her hair brushed and clean, but nothing could hide the hollowness in her cheeks or the way her hands trembled constantly now, a tremor that hadn't existed before the basement. She kept looking around the courtroom with confused curiosity, like a child brought to an incomprehensible adult event, occasionally whispering to me, "Why are we here? Is this a party?" I'd squeeze her hand and tell her we'd leave soon, knowing we wouldn't, hating myself for the lie. Dr. Michael Reeves took the stand first, the emergency room physician who'd treated Helen the night I found her. He was younger than me, early 40s maybe, with the kind of tired competence that came from too many overnight shifts. Patricia walked him through Helen's condition methodically, each detail landing like a hammer blow. Severe dehydration consistent with 3 to 5 days without adequate fluid intake, Dr. Reeves testified, his voice professionally neutral. Stage 2 pressure ulcers on her hips and lower back, indicating prolonged immobility in a single position. Malnutrition, hypothermia from exposure to cold concrete. Muscle atrophy in her legs suggesting she'd been unable to stand or move freely. He pulled up photographs on the courtroom screen, medical documentation of Helen's body the night she was admitted, and I had to look away even though I'd lived through it. The jury didn't look away. I watched their faces harden as they stared at images of my wife's brutalized body. "In your medical opinion, Dr. Reeves," Patricia asked, "was this the result of accidental neglect or intentional harm?" The doctor didn't hesitate. Intentional. The pattern of injuries, the severity of dehydration, the specific nature of the pressure ulcers, these don't happen from someone forgetting to check on a patient. These happen from deliberate abandonment over an extended period. He leaned forward slightly, addressing the jury directly. "I've been an ER physician for 18 years. I've seen caregiver burnout. I've seen families overwhelmed by the demands of Alzheimer's care. This wasn't that. This was systematic deprivation of basic human needs: water, food, movement, dignity. Someone made a conscious choice to leave Mrs. Reynolds in conditions they knew would cause harm." Across the courtroom, Lily sat at the defense table in clothes her lawyer had carefully selected to make her look younger, more sympathetic. She was crying silently, dabbing at her eyes with tissue. The performance made me sick. Helen dozed off during the medical testimony, her head resting against my shoulder, exhausted by the strange environment and the presence of so many people. I was grateful she'd missed Dr. Reeves describing what had been done to her body in clinical detail. But Patricia woke her gently when Dr. Sarah Mitchell took the stand, the psychiatrist who'd been evaluating Helen's cognitive state. "Mrs. Reynolds needs to be present for this part," Patricia whispered to me. "The jury needs to see her reaction to the psychological testimony." Dr. Mitchell was in her 60s, gray-haired and grandmotherly, with the kind of warm presence that probably put her patients at ease. That warmth disappeared when she began describing what Lily's actions had done to Helen's mind. "Alzheimer's is a progressive disease," she explained to the jury. "We expect decline, but it typically follows a predictable trajectory. Mrs. Reynolds's cognitive deterioration over the past 6 weeks has been dramatically accelerated beyond what we'd expect. The trauma of her confinement, the fear, the isolation, the physical deprivation, combined with the abrupt cessation of her medications, created what we call a catastrophic stressor event," Dr. Mitchell continued, her voice taking on an edge of anger. "Think of Alzheimer's like a dam that's slowly cracking. Mrs. Reynolds's trauma was a sledgehammer to that dam. The cognitive decline that might have taken 2 or 3 years happened in 2 weeks. She pulled up charts showing Helen's cognitive test scores from 6 months ago compared to now. The drop was devastating, a cliff where there should have been a gentle slope. Mrs. Reynolds has lost vocabulary, executive function, emotional regulation, and significant portions of her long-term memory. She can no longer recognize her own daughter. She requires 24-hour care and will for the remainder of her life. This damage is permanent and irreversible." The jury was looking at Helen now, at this small, confused woman who kept asking me in stage whispers when we could go home. Patricia approached with a folder, and I knew what was coming next. "Mrs. Reynolds," she said gently, kneeling beside Helen's wheelchair, "I'm going to show you some photographs. Can you tell me if you recognize anyone?" She held up the first photo, a family picture from 5 years ago, all 3 of us at Helen's retirement party. Helen squinted at it, her finger reaching out to touch the glossy surface. "That's Jack," she said with sudden clarity, pointing at me. "That's my husband." Pride flickered in her voice, the pride of getting something right. Then her finger moved to her own image. "I think that's me when I was younger. I had a blue dress like that." Her finger hovered over Lily, and the courtroom held its collective breath. "I don't know her," Helen said finally. Patricia showed her another photo. This one more recent, Lily alone. Helen's entire body went rigid. "Is that the woman who locked me up?" she whispered, and her hand found mine, gripping it desperately. "Is she going to lock me up again?" The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Justice Rebecca Morrison, leaned forward. "Mrs. Reynolds, do you know who that woman is? Her name?" Helen stared at the photograph for a long moment, her face working through emotions I couldn't quite read. When she finally spoke, her voice was so quiet the court reporter had to ask her to repeat it. "I used to have a daughter," Helen whispered, still staring at Lily's picture. "She had kind eyes when she was little. She used to bring me flowers from the garden." Tears were sliding down Helen's face now, and she looked up at me with something that might have been clarity breaking through the fog. "Jack, what happened to my daughter? The one with the kind eyes? Where did she go?" I opened my mouth to answer, but nothing came out because I didn't know. That daughter was gone, if she'd ever really existed at all. Across the courtroom, Lily had her face in her hands, shoulders shaking. I couldn't tell if she was crying from guilt or from being confronted with the monster she'd become. Helen's hand was still in mine, her grip surprisingly strong. "I'm tired," she said, the moment of clarity already fading. "Can we go home now? I want to go home." And I realized that for Helen, home was anywhere I was, because everything else, including the daughter she'd birthed and raised, had been erased. Adam looked like he'd aged a decade in the 6 weeks since his arrest. He'd lost weight, his suit hanging loose on a frame that had always been slight, and his hands shook visibly as the bailiff swore him in. This was his plea deal testimony, the price of his reduced sentence, 9 years instead of the 15 he'd been facing. 9 years in exchange for dismantling his wife completely. He wouldn't look at Lily as he sat down in the witness box, kept his eyes fixed on Patricia Chen like she was the only safe place to look in a room full of people who wanted him destroyed. Patricia started gently. establishing timeline and relationship before moving in for the kill. Mr. Reynolds, whose idea was it to lock Helen Reynolds in the basement? Adam's voice came out barely above a whisper. Lily's. It was always Lily's plan. Walk us through it, Patricia said. From the beginning. When did your wife first discuss this scheme? Adam swallowed hard, Adam's apple bobbing in his thin throat. About 2 months before Jack left for Chicago. We were drowning in debt from my failed investments, and Lily knew her dad kept most of their savings liquid for Helen's future care. She said we could borrow it, use it to fix our financial situation, and pay it back before anyone noticed. His voice gained confidence as he spoke, like he'd rehearsed this confession 1,000 times. I told her we couldn't access their accounts without power of attorney. That's when she suggested forging the documents. She said her mom's Alzheimer's was bad enough that Helen wouldn't understand what she was signing anyway, so why not just sign for her? The casual evil of it hung in the courtroom air. Adam continued, each word another nail in Lily's coffin. When Jack called about his mother's stroke, Lily saw the opportunity. She told me, Dad will be gone for weeks. Mom won't remember any of this happened. Dad will never know. She made it sound so simple. Patricia pulled up the forged power of attorney documents on the courtroom screen. And the actual forgery? Who did that? Adam's shame was visible in the way his shoulders curled inward. Lily practiced Helen's signature for days. She had old birthday cards, canceled checks, medical forms. She'd traced them over and over until she could reproduce it perfectly. I helped with getting my friend Robert to notarize it without asking questions. He owed me money, so he did it as a favor. We told him Helen was too sick to come in person. The jury was taking notes now, faces set in expressions of disgust. What about the basement? Patricia asked. When was that decision made? Adam's voice dropped again the second day after Jack left. Helen was having a bad episode, kept trying to leave the house looking for Jack. Lily called me panicking, said she couldn't manage Helen and execute the financial transfers at the same time. She said, there's a basement with a lock, nobody would know. I told her that was insane, but she said it would only be for a few days, just until we got the money transferred and could hire someone to watch Helen properly. But you never hired anyone, Patricia pressed. No, Adam admitted. Because once the money was in our accounts, I moved it immediately into crypto trading. I thought I could multiply it, fix all our problems, and return the original amount. Instead, I lost almost everything. This was the part I'd been waiting for, the confession of his own spectacular failure. Patricia walked him through it methodically. How much did you lose in cryptocurrency trades? Adam couldn't meet anyone's eyes. About $180,000 in the first 10 days. I was trying to make it back with high-risk altcoins, leverage trading, things I didn't fully understand. Every trade I made lost money. Then I got desperate and fell for one of those scam websites that promised to double your Bitcoin. Sent them $80,000. The website disappeared the next day. His voice cracked on the numbers. By the time I realized how bad it was, there was only about $40,000 left of the original $300,000. When did you tell Lily? Patricia asked. Adam's silence stretched out. 3 days before Jack came home, she lost her mind, started screaming that I'd ruined everything, that we had to leave the country immediately before Jack discovered what we'd done. Patricia clicked to bring up text messages on the screen. Let me show you Exhibit 47. Text message from Lily Reynolds to you, dated October 16th, sent at 2:17 p.m. Can you read it for the court? Adam's voice was mechanical as he read his wife's words. Problem solved. Mom's in the basement with enough water for a week. We're free by Thursday. Book the Portugal flights tonight. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of someone in the gallery crying softly. It might have been Helen's former co-worker, one of the few people who'd shown up to support us. Patricia let the words hang there before continuing. And did you book those flights? Adam nodded. That night. One-way tickets to Lisbon for November 12th. Then something unexpected happened. Adam broke. His composure, already fragile, shattered completely. I should have stopped her, he said, tears streaming down his face, his words coming out in gasps. When she said to put Helen in the basement, I should have said no. When she forged the documents, I should have called the police. When I lost the money, I should have confessed immediately. He was looking at me now, directly at me for the first time since taking the stand. Mr. Reynolds, I'm so sorry. I'm a coward. I let your wife suffer because I was too weak to stand up to Lily, too ashamed to admit what I'd done, too scared to face the consequences. His apology meant nothing to me, less than nothing. It was the self-serving confession of a man trying to shed some of his guilt before walking into prison. But the jury was watching, and I could see some of them softening slightly toward him, seeing him as the weak accomplice rather than the mastermind. Lily's defense attorney, a sharp-dressed woman named Caroline Foster, stood for cross-examination. She knew her only chance was to shift blame back onto Adam, paint him as more culpable than the prosecution claimed. "Mr. Reynolds, you testified that locking Mrs. Helen Reynolds in the basement was your wife's idea, but you went along with it, correct?" Adam nodded miserably. "And the financial fraud? You were the one who actually lost the money gambling on cryptocurrency, weren't you?" Another nod. Foster circled closer, sensing an opening. "In all your conversations with Lily about her mother, did she ever express concern for Helen's well-being? Any worry about her mother's condition?" Adam opened his mouth, closed it. The pause stretched out so long the judge leaned forward. "Mr. Reynolds, please answer the question." When Adam finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. "Once," he said, "on day 5 or 6, Lily went to check on Helen and came back upstairs crying. She said her mom looked terrible, that we should bring her up, that this had gone too far." Hope flickered across Foster's face, but Adam wasn't finished. "Then she laughed," he continued, his voice hollow. "She actually laughed and said, 'What am I thinking? Mom won't remember this anyway, and we're already in too deep.' She went back downstairs and I heard her tell Helen, 'Just a few more days, Mom, then you'll be free.' Except we both knew Helen would never be free because we were planning to be in Portugal." The hope died on Foster's face. She'd tried to find redemption in her client, and instead uncovered more evidence of Lily's calculated cruelty. Across the courtroom, Lily was staring at Adam with pure hatred, mouthing something I couldn't quite make out but that looked a lot like "I'll kill you." Adam saw it too, and something in his expression shifted. Whatever love or loyalty had once existed between them was gone, burned away in this courtroom where they were each trying to save themselves by destroying the other. Christopher Walsh called me to his office 3 weeks after sentencing with news he delivered the way doctors deliver terminal diagnoses. Quickly, professionally, with just enough sympathy to acknowledge the blow, but not enough to dwell on it. "We've completed the asset recovery process," he said, sliding a folder across his desk. "Between Adam's seized bank accounts, their joint savings, and the liquidation of personal property, we recovered $42,000. He paused, letting the number hang in the air between us. "The rest is gone, Jack. The cryptocurrency losses are unrecoverable. The money sent to offshore scam operations is untraceable. The $75,000 home equity loan was spent before we could freeze it." I stared at the number on the page. $42,000 recovered from $300,000 stolen. 14%. The rest, as Walsh said, simply gone, evaporated into the digital ether of failed crypto trades and con artists' pockets. "The civil judgment will say $300,000, Walsh continued. "The court will order them to pay full restitution plus interest and legal fees, but realistically, they'll be in prison for years, unemployable when they get out, and bankruptcy will likely wipe the debt anyway." He looked at me with something approaching pity. "I'm sorry, Jack. The justice system gave you accountability, but it can't give you your money back." The medical bills arrived with crushing regularity, thick envelopes that I'd learned to recognize by weight alone. Helen's emergency hospitalization, $47,000 after insurance. The psychiatric evaluation, $8,500. Physical therapy for muscle atrophy, $200 per session, 3 times weekly. The memory care facility where Helen now lived, because I could no longer keep her safe at home, $9,200 per month. I sat at my kitchen table with a calculator and a spreadsheet, watching 40 years of careful financial planning unravel in columns of red numbers. The $42,000 recovered lasted 6 weeks. Then I started liquidating. First the money market accounts, then the mutual funds, then the retirement accounts I'd sworn I'd never touch before 65. Each withdrawal came with penalties and tax implications that made the losses even worse. By February, 3 months after finding Helen in the basement, I'd burned through another $80,000 just keeping her in basic care. Christopher Walsh had warned me this would happen, that Lily had stolen not just the money itself but my ability to weather the crisis her actions created. She'd stolen the safety net, then set it on fire. The civil lawsuit judgment came through in March, a thick legal document that declared Lily Reynolds and Adam Reynolds jointly and severally liable for $300,000 in restitution, plus $85,000 in legal fees, plus interest accruing at 6% annually. Walsh had it framed as a joke, a reminder of the Pyrrhic victory we'd won. "This paper is worth exactly nothing," he said, hanging it on his wall next to other impossible judgments he'd won, "but it exists. Permanently. They'll never escape it. Every job application that runs a background check, every apartment rental, every credit application for the rest of their lives will show this judgment. They'll be financial ghosts." I appreciated the sentiment more than the reality. The judgment meant Lily would never rebuild a normal life after prison, but it didn't pay for Helen's care. It didn't replace what was lost. It was accountability without recompense, justice without restoration. A hollow victory that echoed when I held it up to the light. I visited Helen every day at Meadowbrook Memory Care, a facility that tried very hard to not look like a hospital, and failed in the way all such places do. Soft lighting, muted colors, carefully curated artwork that was supposed to be soothing but just felt sad. Helen's room was on the second floor, overlooking a courtyard where residents sometimes sat in wheelchairs, staring at nothing. She was in her chair when I arrived that Thursday afternoon, looking out the window with that empty expression I'd learned meant she was neither here nor there, just floating somewhere between past and present. "Hi, Helen," I said, kneeling beside her chair so we were eye level. Her face brightened immediately, that smile that had made me fall in love with her 40 years ago breaking through the fog. "Oh, hello," she said warmly, reaching out to pat my cheek. Then the question I'd started hearing more often. "Are you my son? You have kind eyes like my son." The words hit harder than they should have, this far into her decline. "Close," I said, taking her hand. "I'm Jack. I'm your husband, and I'm here to keep you safe." Helen nodded like that made perfect sense, though I could see the information sliding away, even as I spoke it. "That's nice," she said. "It's good to be safe. I was locked up once, in a dark place. A woman with angry eyes locked me there." She looked at me with sudden clarity. "But you came and got me. You're the one who opened the door." The moment of lucidity pierced me. She didn't remember my name, didn't remember our daughter, didn't remember 37 years of marriage, but somewhere deep in whatever remained of Helen's mind, she remembered that I'd saved her, that I'd come when she needed me. "That's right," I said, my voice thick. "And I'll always come get you. Always." She smiled again, squeezed my hand, and then the moment passed. "Are you my son?" she asked again, the memory already reset. "Close," I repeated. "I'm Jack. I'm here to keep you safe." We sat like that for an hour, having the same conversation in loops, until Helen fell asleep in her chair and I quietly left. The letter arrived on a Tuesday in April, forwarded from the prison system, Lily's name and inmate number printed in the return address corner. I stood in my empty kitchen holding it, this thin envelope that somehow weighed 1,000 pounds. Part of me wanted to read it, wanted to know what she possibly thought she could say that would matter. But the envelope was slightly transparent, and when I held it up to the light, I could see one line of her handwriting showing through. "I'm still your daughter." That was enough. I didn't need to read the rest. Didn't need her justifications or apologies or whatever narrative she'd constructed to live with what she'd done. I walked to the sink, turned on the gas stove, and held the corner of the envelope to the flame. It caught quickly, burning fast and hot, Lily's words turning to ash before they could poison the air with their presence. The smoke detector started beeping from the smoke. I waved it away with a dish towel, watching the last scraps of paper curl and blacken in the sink. "No," I said aloud to the empty kitchen. "You're not." Helen died on a Thursday morning in March. 3 years and 4 months after I found her in the basement. I was sitting beside her bed at Meadowbrook like I did every morning, holding her hand while she slept, when her breathing simply changed, became quieter, slower, then stopped. The nurse said it was peaceful, the kind of passing families hope for, but I knew better. Helen had been dying since the day Lily locked that door. This was just her body finally catching up to what had been taken from her years ago. In all that time, she never once recognized Lily's name again, never asked about her daughter, never seemed to notice the absence. I used to think that was tragic, but eventually I understood it was mercy. Helen died without the burden of knowing her own child had tried to erase her. Some truths are too heavy to carry, even into death. The funeral was small. Helen's sister from Boston, a few neighbors who remembered Helen from before the Alzheimer's, 2 women from her book club who'd visited occasionally in the early days at Meadowbrook. Christopher Walsh came, and Detective Morrison, men who'd become strange fixtures in this chapter of my life. Lily's absence was conspicuous, a ghost at the gathering. She'd requested compassionate release to attend her mother's funeral and been denied. The parole board's letter had been brief. Given the nature of your crimes against the deceased, your presence would be inappropriate. Adam sent flowers, an enormous arrangement that arrived the morning of the service. I threw them in the dumpster behind the funeral home without reading the card. Some gestures are too little and too late to mean anything at all. 6 months later, the notice arrived. Lily's first parole hearing, scheduled for October. She'd served 4 years of her 12-year sentence. I called the victim services coordinator immediately. "I'll be there," I said. "I need to make a statement." She tried to talk me out of it gently, explaining that parole hearings could be traumatic, that my written statement would carry the same weight. But I was done letting other people speak for me. "Justice isn't revenge," I told her. "It's accountability. Lily needs to serve every single year she was sentenced to, and I'm going to make sure the parole board understands why." I visit Helen's grave every Sunday now. It's on a hill overlooking a small pond, peaceful in the way I'd wanted her final years to be. I talk to her like she can hear me, tell her about my week, about the house that's too quiet now, about the daughter we lost long before that basement. "She chose greed over you," I say, my hand resting on the cool marble headstone. "I chose you, always. Some people think blood makes you family. Blood just makes you related. Family is who stays when staying is hard. Lily stopped being family the moment she locked that door, and I stopped being her father the moment I broke it open. If this story resonated with you, please share it. Too many families are destroyed by those who should protect them. The vulnerable deserve our voice.